Welcome to the Haunt Vault, where the lines between what you know and what you think you know start to blur. Let me ask you something. Have you ever forgotten a simple task, like why you walked into a room or where you put your keys? We all have. But what if those small lapses weren't just forgetfulness? What if they were something else? In tonight's story, The Glitch, we explore the unsettling feeling that creeps in when things don't quite add up. As one person's life begins to slip out of focus, they realize there's something wrong, something they can't quite put their finger on. Before we begin, take a moment. Are you sure everything is as you remember it, or have the cracks already started to show?
Let me ask you something. Have you ever forgotten why you walked into a room? Or stared at your phone, wondering why you picked it up in the first place? It happens to everyone, right? A little lapse in memory. You laugh it off. Tell yourself it's just part of being busy. But have you noticed it happening more often? Not just once in a while, but regularly. Like there's a gap forming in your mind. I used to think it was normal too. Just the price of modern life. A brain constantly pulled in different directions. At first, it was small things, misplacing my phone, walking into the kitchen only to stand there, trying to remember what I came for. Everyone does that, right? We all have those moments where our minds go blank for no reason. But then, it started getting worse. One morning, I was late for work. I rushed out of the house, keys in hand, but by the time I got to the door, I couldn't remember if I'd locked it. It's such a simple thing. Locking the door, but I stood there, frozen, unable to recall the sound of the lock clicking into place. I had to go back inside and check. Sure enough, it was locked. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like a part of my morning routine had slipped away. And that wasn't the only thing. A few days later, I had plans to meet a friend for coffee. It was one of those casual things we'd set up in a text message. Nothing too formal, just to catch up. I got there on time, ordered my drink, and waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. I texted him asking where he was, and he responded almost instantly, "I'm here." "Where are you?" Except he wasn't. I looked around the cafe, and there was no sign of him. I even went outside, thinking maybe we'd somehow crossed paths, but there was nothing. The weirdest part? He swore I never showed up. He said he'd been sitting there the whole time, waiting for me, but I know I was there. I know I didn't miss him. I checked my phone later, and our messages matched up perfectly. Same time, same place. But how could we have both been there and not seen each other? I tried to chalk it up to a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe it was just some mix-up, but it lingered in my mind, gnawing at me. Have you ever had something like that happen? Where reality just doesn't add up. And then there was the photo. I was scrolling through my phone, looking at pictures from a family event a few months back. It was just a random afternoon. Everyone gathered for my cousin's birthday. Nothing special. But when I looked at one of the group shots, something felt wrong. I was in the picture, smiling, standing next to my cousin. But here's the thing. I don't remember being there. I couldn't recall the day at all. I asked my parents about it, and they looked at me like I was crazy. "Of course you were there. Don't you remember? You were the one who brought the cake." But no matter how hard I tried, the memory just wasn't there. It was like the event had been erased from my mind, yet everyone else remembered it perfectly. I was there, physically but mentally. It was like I hadn't existed that day. And that's when I started to realize something wasn't right. At first, it's easy to brush off, isn't it? You forget where you put your keys. Or maybe you blank on a conversation from a few weeks ago. But what happens when the gaps get bigger? What happens when people start telling you things that you know didn't happen? Or worse, when they swear you said something completely different from what you remember? A colleague and I were discussing a project deadline the other day. A casual chat about pushing the due date. The next morning, I brought it up again, and she looked at me like I was out of my mind. She swore we hadn't talked about any deadlines, that I hadn't even mentioned the project. You said we were ahead of schedule, she insisted. But I remember the conversation perfectly. I know what I said. So how could we both have such different versions of the same moment? I started noticing other things, too. Have you ever been driving and suddenly you realize you can't remember part of the trip? Like, you're at the red light and you know you must have taken a right turn past the park, but for the life of you, you can't recall any of it. That's been happening to me more often. Little stretches of time, just gone. I started paying more attention, trying to catch these lapses when they happened, but it's hard when you don't even realize they're happening until it's too late. And then there was the night I stayed late at work. Everyone else had gone home, and I was the last one there. As I packed up to leave, I saw my reflection in the window. Nothing unusual, except, for a second, it felt like the reflection wasn't mine. It was like looking at a stranger, someone wearing my face, but not quite right. I blinked, and it was gone, but the feeling stayed with me, like a shadow following me home. I tried to tell a friend about all this, thinking maybe I was just overworked, that it was stress or lack of sleep. We were sitting at a cafe, and I laid it all out for him. The forgotten moments, the strange gaps in time, the photo. He listened, nodding along, but then, halfway through the conversation, his face went completely blank. He just stopped. It was like someone pressed pause on him. And when he came back, he looked at me like nothing had happened. When I asked him about it, he didn't remember a thing I'd said. Not a single word. That's when I knew something was really wrong. Now, I'm sitting here in the dark. I've locked the doors, unplugged everything, even shut off my phone. I don't want them to find me, but they will. They always do. I can feel them watching. They know when you start noticing too much. It's not just about memory anymore. It's about everything. They're changing things, erasing us bit by bit until there's nothing left. And now that you've heard this, they'll come for you too. It starts small, but once you start noticing, they'll notice you. So I'll ask you one last thing. Before they find me, when was the last time you checked your front door? Are you sure it's locked, or did they already get in?
Thank you for joining us on The Haunt Vault. If tonight's story left you questioning what's real, you're not alone. Memory is fragile, and sometimes the smallest cracks can lead to the deepest fractures. The glitch reminds us that reality isn't always as solid as we think. Maybe next time you forget something, you'll wonder, was it just a lapse, or is something else slipping through? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Stay alert, because in the shadows, things aren't always as they seem. Until next time, keep watching and keep questioning.